Hello, and welcome to a presentation on your breath, something I never thought I would be presenting on. And this is the culmination of the last 6 months of a rabbit hole I went down after doing some of the breathing exercises that you see here in the arc. And I've learned a lot of things, but by no means am I an expert. But I want to share with some of the things that I have learned that it might be pretty eye opening to you as it was for me. So this is breath. It's a behavior, and a behavior that you never even meant to learn. So first of all, does any of these sound familiar? You keep chasing that satisfying breath, but it never quite gets there. You sigh, yawn, or hiccup a lot, and not even knowing why. You run out of breath, or your face gets flushed when you're talking to somebody, even if you feel calm. Or deep breathing exercises actually make you feel dizzy and more anxious. Or maybe you get worked up fast, like your system's always ready to overact. So, first of all, let's do a little breathing exercise so we're all on the same page of one of the things that we're talking about. So, just get somewhere comfortable, and you just don't want to be hunched over so much because you want to be able to have full access, your lungs, full access to everything. And when we breathe here, we want to breathe through our nose. We're just going to do this for 1 minute. Breathe through your nose and try to breathe through your belly, not your shoulders. And sometimes it helps to put your hand on your belly, your hand on your chest. You want to feel your hand on your belly to be moving more than your hand on your chest. All right, let's do this for 1 minute altogether. Go ahead, through your nose. That's now in through your nose. Or in the belly. Not deep breaths, just average breaths. Notice if you feel any tightness anywhere. When you breathe out, just let it out. With no need to push. When you breathe in, you didn't need your shoulders going up. Every second. Count of 5. Fill up 5. And inhale 1, 2, 3, 5. That's good. I think that was about a minute. So how did you feel? Do you now feel more grounded? That's what most people say you should feel. But did you feel like you needed more air? Or did you feel like this is just a waste of time? Or you wanted to breathe faster or slower? Or do you feel even a little more anxious now? None of those answers are wrong. It's what your experience is. And at the end of this, I think you'll get a good idea of if you experienced anything other than feeling more grounded, you'll know why. Let me tell you my early experience. So after about a month of doing something like this, and I did it anywhere from 5 minutes to 20 minutes once or twice a day, my resting heart rate dropped 3 beats and the perceived exertion went down significantly. What I mean by this is I had a hiking path that I would go on. It was about 4 miles that I went on consistently, but I stopped doing it right before I started doing these breathing exercises. And then about a month later, I did it again. And so I wasn't really exercising to get in more shape, but all of a sudden, my heart rate monitor on the same path was showing significantly lower heart rate than it ever was before. And I felt like I could, I wasn't having to breathe near as hard. It's like the walk, the hike turned into what was strenuous to a stroll. And I actually thought something like my watch was even wrong. It didn't make any sense to me until I realized, oh, that's the one thing that's changed. And it made a huge difference. Another one was when I do bike. I like bike riding, mountain biking, but I don't do it much. I don't do it near enough to even stay in shape, much less to get in good shape. So whenever I go riding, my heart rate is maxes out and I breathe so hard, I'm about to die. But after this, after 2 months of this, yeah, my heart rate was still going high, but it didn't feel that high. It was very strange. But I have to say, heart rate, HRV, heart rate variability, which is a metric that most people use when they're actually trying to measure breath work, if it's working or not. Mine actually didn't change much. So HRV is a good measure of overall health status. It's the measure of your heart rate, but it's not like pulse, beat, beat, beat. Your pulse, when it goes beep, beep, it's not going beep, 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 beep. It goes beep, 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 beep. It's variable in the distance between the beats, the timing between the beats. And that's a good thing. Think about it as being flexible. The higher the HRV number, the more flexible your heart is. And it correlates to being healthier. Mine actually didn't change a whole lot, but it did later. Eventually it did. After about 3 months, it started to. And breathing habituating starting. So when I would be driving, I would find myself naturally settling down into a slower cadence of breath and everything being easier in general. I could easily breathe through turbulence. Had a flight that I take, and I don't mind flights. They don't really bother me too much until we hit turbulence, and it stresses me out. And this one time, this was after 3 months, we hit turbulence, and kind of automatically, I went into breathing. And for me, what I found is my range or my duration that I breathe in and out is 7 seconds actually. So breathing in 7 seconds and out 7 seconds. And in Q&A stuff, I can explain how we figured that out. But I started doing that, breathing in 7 seconds, breathing out 7 seconds. And it seemed like nothing all of a sudden. It was not an issue all of a sudden. Amazing. So there are some real things about this. And down the rabbit hole, I've learned breathing techniques, they are effective, yet there are some misconceptions as well too. Among all the methods, there's plenty of methods. There's more methods that we can even list in this presentation. But simple nasal breathing might be the absolute most impactful. Do you breathe through your nose? We should be breathing through our nose almost all the time. And I do a lot of that now. At night, even at night, even when exercising, rarely now do I ever breathe through my mouth. In extreme cases. Otherwise, I'm breathing through my nose, and it makes everything easier. I think I am coming to the conclusion after about 6 months. It's better to view a breathing practice like what we just did, a practice. It could be other things as well too. Wim Hof has his own practice. There's a practice where you breathe through one nostril, then another nostril. There's hundreds of them. I see those now as a temporary relief measure. Very valuable. But one's breathing response to situations that end up influencing the type of breathing you do, that behavior may be more of a fundamental issue. And we'll get into that. After 6 months, there's still so much more to explore. Some surprises. Deep breathing, I've learned it often provokes more anxiety than relieves. We don't breathe hard during exercise to actually get more oxygen. Brain fog does not come from a lack of oxygen, but the dizziness could. We normally, this is the answer to this question here, we normally breathe in at least 4 times as much oxygen than our body can even use. Oxygen is not the problem. 60% of ambulances, of the ambulance runs in major U.S. cities are actually due to dysfunctional breathing. There's a survey done about this with one of the doctors in this field, and all the emergency calls that were found to involve breathing related complaints, they had no identifiable organic disease, meaning the symptoms were caused by behaviorally learned dysfunctional breathing, not asthma, not heart issues or structural illnesses like they may have been originally dispatched for. So just the interesting part of this, though, the shortness of breath, chest pain, dizziness, and palpitations, they were all labeled as non-cardiac chest pains or hyperventilation syndrome. The root issue was chronic overbreathing, carbon dioxide dysregulation, which is called hypocampia, and stress-triggered breathing habits. Dr. Litchfield, which is one of the leaders in this area, is what he says about it. They weren't sick. They weren't breathing poorly. They were breathing poorly, and no one has taught them otherwise. So you can roughly categorize 4 approaches, even though there's probably thousands of different techniques or approaches. We talked about the gentle breathing. That's kind of like a baseline. What we're going to talk more about is resilient training. That's like what we just did, like resonant, coherent, breath holds, slow extended exhales, that kind of stuff. And we're going to talk about the real life relearning, which is the situational awareness and the behavior that influences how we breathe. We won't talk much about the high energy boost. This is like the Wim Hof. It's a more advanced technique. It's something that's good, but it's more of doing a workout rather than a breathing practice. So what's coherence? Like what we just did was called a coherent breathing. It can be also called resonance, resilience. There are some distinctions between that, but in general, what it means is we bring our breathing rate our heart rate variability, our heart, and our blood pressure in coherence. So let me show you what might explain it a little bit better. This morning, I did a 10-minute breathing, recorded a 10-minute breathing sample that I did. This is Cubios, which is a research software for doing HRV and breathing statistics. It measures what you're seeing down here, what you're seeing up here across the top. I know it's hard to see a lot of this probably for you, but this is a 10-minute span of where I'm breathing. Actually, the first part, about the first 5 or 6 minutes, I'm just talking, I'm just doing work. And what you see here is this spectrum analysis of the breathing. And this is what is incoherent. This is what incoherence looks like. What you're seeing as I drag this over, and it's going over from like, the first minute or two to the next 2 or 3 minutes, and then also, and you'll see this. You're seeing a lot of peaks here, right? That means there's a lot of different frequencies that are just going on in my heart. Coherence is when all these frequencies, if you can do the breathing, they should come together. And instead of having a lot of peaks, they come together into one peak, and the one peak gets higher because they're coming together. All the frequencies of the heart's come together, and everything with the breathing, the heart, the blood pressure, frequencies are starting to aggregate, I guess is the good way of saying it. They're coming together. They're resonating. So what you'll see as I move it over, see still some big peaks. Now I'm starting to get into the breathing, and you're seeing the peak go up higher, and we're dropping all the other ones. This is what coherence looks like. And I started here, so you're looking just at 4 minutes worth. So even in just 1 minute, you can get coherent. You can get coherent in a few seconds. All one big, nice peak. That's coherent. So hopefully that's a little bit clear. Now, what that correlates to in real life is us feeling more grounded, more centered, at peace, in the flow. And it is inversely related to disease states. Now, the next big thing that I learned was about carbon dioxide, CO2, the tolerance of what our body thinks it needs is critical. So what does CO2 do in our body? We think about, we're breathing oxygen in, we're expelling carbon dioxide out. That's right. But if we expel out too much, we're in problem. And what we'll see is our behaviors keep us expelling out too much all the time. So CO2, oxygen comes in the blood, goes into the blood and hemoglobin, right? It does not release without the presence of carbon dioxide. The levels of carbon dioxide in our blood will allow the oxygen to get to where it needs to go into the tissues. So we can have all the oxygen you want in our body. If we don't have no CO2, it's not going into our tissues. It's not being used. CO2 also stimulates, energizes, and is estimated with what is called a Bolt score. And we'll do that. You get to see an estimate of how much carbon dioxide is in your body, how much you are holding. So we'll see it for ourselves. This is a little bit different. So what I want you to start doing while I'm talking is just breathing normal. Quiet, peaceful, normal. Just breathe however you want to breathe. But don't be taking big breaths, or don't be holding your breath, all that kind of stuff. Because what we're going to do is, when I say, okay, pause. And at the end of your next breath, as you're releasing the breath, you pause it. And we're going to hold our nose, because sometimes we like to breathe through our nose anyway, even when we're doing this. And we're just going to time how long we can comfortably pause our breath at the end of the exhale. Could be a second, could be 30 seconds. Could be some people can do even longer than 30 seconds. And what we're going to do, that gives a good estimation of the tolerance that our bodies think is the right level of carbon dioxide. I'll explain that a little bit more. So when do you know when to stop? That's going to be the most important part. Let me get a stopwatch going here. And when I say it's time to hold the breath, exhale, hold your breath, and you're going to wait until you feel not a strong urge to breathe, but a reasonable urge to breathe. You don't want to be gasping, but you don't want it at the very first moment. Oh, I need to breathe. Or just sit there for a second. Like you may feel within 2 or 3 seconds of that, I need to breathe. Just wait for a minute. If you start feeling your throat going, like you have this natural reflex to breathe, if it's strong, breathe. Well, if it's moderate, breathe. You don't want to hold it real tight. So you're going to breathe, let it out. And we're going to sit there and see how long it's comfortable to pause. Okay, so you're breathing normal. You're breathing normal. I got to get breathing normal here too after talking. So now on the next out breath, pause. If you can keep going, keep going. That's great. So, if you held it too long, if you're completely out of breath now, you should be able to, within 2 breaths, you're kind of back to normal. So how long did you hold your breath? If you could pause your breath reasonably comfortable, and it was less than 10 seconds, the way you're breathing, the actual way you're breathing is holding you back. If you're in between 10 and 20 seconds, which is where I was when I first did this, and I'm a little bit better now, it's the way you're breathing is actually slowing you down. If you're in between 20 or 30 seconds, I'm about 20 right now. You're getting there, but your recovery could be stronger. So you could have better utilization of the carbon dioxide. If you're over 30 seconds, you're boosted already. You're doing fantastic. You're probably an athlete, or you're probably a very experienced breathing expert. So what's going on here? Oxygen does matter. Oxygen matters tremendously, but it's no good if it's not getting into the tissues. For us, carbon dioxide is what does that, and that matters even more for us. Overbreathing is something you will hear a term that reduces CO2. Overbreathing is anytime you're breathing especially through the mouth, through your chest, you're doing deep breathing exercises, or you're not letting your breath release all the way. When you exhale, it's a passive movement for your diaphragm. Your diaphragm is just relaxing. You're not having to push it out. If it doesn't relax all the way, you keep it tight, then you're overbreathing. In other words, you're expelling out more carbon dioxide than your body really needs. And over time, that's even more of a problem. It's called hypnocampia. That means low CO2, and it results to your blood vessels being constricted. Not just your blood vessels, but the smooth muscles that are in your blood vessels they're also in your larynx and throat. And brain fog and dizziness, because the brain fog, you're not really getting your oxygen to your brain because the carbon dioxide is getting two things. Carbon dioxide is not there to let it go. And you're being constricted as well too, because the smooth muscles in the blood vessels are closing down. This is common, not in athletes. I'm not sure why there's a typo. It's common in non-athletes, kids with ADHD, and people with anxiety. And frankly, this is common in everybody now. So what's the big deal? So what if we have a temporary episode of being nervous or breathing weird? Does it really matter? It does. Because yes, you can have a temporary episode and that in itself doesn't matter. The problem happens is each time you start training yourself, your body to accept lower and lower levels of carbon dioxide, thinking that is normal. So what happens is when you go out for a walk to the mailbox, you're going to start breathing harder. Whereas before, you never even thought about it. And it's not that you need more oxygen. That's what we think, right? It's your body is thinking it needs to get rid of carbon dioxide because it thinks it needs to work at a low level of carbon dioxide, which it doesn't. But that does happen over time. Our body gets habituated to that over breathing all the time. This is breath as a behavior. And this is where it became a lot clearer for me. And it has taken probably 6 months for me to really get this clear. And I'm still working on it. Dr. Peter Litchfield is the leader in this area, breathing or breath as behavior. It's not just physiology. It's not psychology. It's psychophysiology. Our brain and our body working together to make a breathing as behavior. It's not just about getting air in. It's about how the nervous system, the chemistry, the emotions, even belief shape how we believe and how we live. So the first part is air hunger. Air hunger is that feeling of, I can't get enough air, or there's too many people in here, I can't breathe. Or even if you're even sitting in your bed at night, your heart starts pounding, you feel like something's on your chest and you just can't breathe. I can't get air. Well, obviously you can get air. But that feeling is air hunger. And it's triggered by carbon dioxide rising slightly, but it's misinterpreted by the body as danger. It can occur on a moment or in response to stress, speech, your posture, or an emotion as well too. So what do? The first thing our natural reaction is to try to take control. I want to get control. So we breathe more. We breathe more. We try to take control. But what does that do? It lowers our CO2 even more. And over time, that threshold, our body gets lower and lower and lower. So again, we walked to go to the mail, we never even thought about it. Now I walk to the mail, we're breathing heavy just doing that. It's not because we need more oxygen. We're teaching our body to try to live on less and less carbon dioxide. And then what happens is when we lower that threshold from the overbreathing, the mouth breathing, the apnea, sleep apnea, and screen apnea. Screen apnea is a new term I've learned. Then oxygen delivery gets blocked. The hemoglobin does not release the oxygen into the tissues. And then we have constriction. Constriction happens, smooth blood, smooth muscle cells, in the veins, the arteries, in our throat, the airways, the chest tightness, the throat closing, the racing heart, all come with constriction of the smooth muscle that's triggered by low carbon dioxide. And then what happens? Well, then we have a coping reflex, an emotional pattern that we default to for whatever reason. One of our parts defaults to this. It comes up, our part, our protector comes up, then all of a sudden we get triggered into some kind of a rage, a panic, a freeze, shutdown, something like that. And then what happens? We reinforce the air hunger and the cycle continues. This is breath as behavior. So let's reflect. So does deep breathing ever make you feel dizzy or anxious? Maybe it's a little clearer now why it does. We're losing carbon dioxide. Have you ever felt like you're suffocating even though you're breathing more? We're trying to get control of it. But in the process of getting control, we're lowering our carbon dioxide. Why would breathing more sometimes make symptoms worse? Same reason. Could sighing, yawning, or breathlessness mean something deeper? Sighing. What is that? It's a deep breath. There's a few different things about sighing, though. Sighing is a transition for our bodies. It's like a reset breath. So we're working on something, then we finally get it done. That's like a reset breath, a transition. But what if you're sighing every 15 minutes, just sitting there doing stuff and nothing's really transitioning? It's your body's indication that the carbon dioxide level is much lower. The threshold point is much lower. Your Bolt score is low. We need to reverse the cycle. And one of the techniques you can do is just like what we've been doing in that coherent breathing, but maybe you put a pause in between, like what we call the box breathing. That is a way to reverse that cycle, teaching your body to have a higher threshold. Or you can breathe it in for 5 seconds, breathe out for 8 seconds. The important thing is not to trigger that coping reflex or that take control reflex to where we start getting into a spiral. You have to carefully let your body become comfortable with more carbon dioxide. What if your breathing hunger or your condition is not a fixed flaw, but it's actually part of learned behaviors? So what if the breathing hunger, the feeling like I can't get a breath, or something's on my chest, or a condition you have that's related to that is part of that is just learned behaviors, then you can unlearn it. You can reverse the cycle. You can find the parts that are coping, that are accelerating the circle. You can find the parts that are trying to take control, that are trying to say, you need more air, but you don't really. Remember, we breathe in at least 4 times as much oxygen as our body can even use. But we can breathe out carbon dioxide all the time. So there are 4 approaches. Again, we can come back to this slide. Again, gentle nasal breathing, soft belly breathing, the foundation. When you're driving in the car, think about, are you breathing through your mouth? Are you letting your stomach relax and breathing through your stomach? When you're doing this. What are you doing right now? The resilience trains, what we talked about. There's a lot of different techniques in this. There's many in the art that we already do. We talked about the box breathing, the resilient breathing, the resonant breathing, the coherent breathing. They're all good. High energy boosts. That's good for energizing and emotional release. The Wim Hof, I've tried it. I've done it some. It is exhilarating. Exhilarating is the right word. You can easily overbreathe doing that. You do have to make sure you do the breath holds with it. And then it counteracts the warmth. But it's more like going for a run rather than going for a walk. You got to be ready for it. The real life relearning, and that's talking about the behavior side of stuff. And there's really only one big player in this area, and that's capno learning, which is Dr. Litchfield that I mentioned. And he even has a device, a capnography device. It's a nasal cannula, and you have a little portable device that you can take with you. And through your day, you can actually see what your CO2 is. Now, that's an expensive device. It's not for the average person. In the place, you can do something like the Bolt score. So you let your breath out and you see how long you can pause comfortably. That's a good indicator. It's a good proxy for instead of having to spend a few $1,000s on a machine. So let's revisit these last symptoms, and that'll be it for and then Q&A. So do you keep chasing the satisfying breath but never quite get there? Well, that is caused by habitual breath stacking. It's another behavior. Never fully exhaling before the next inhale. In other words, you stop the exhale. You don't breathe it all the way down into the belly. You have to pay attention to stuff like that. When I was talking to my wife, she was like, "Oh man, I do not even let she was saying the lower part of her stomach relax when she breathes." So she would let it out before she lets it all the way. She brings it back in. So it ends up being chest breathing. And where is all the oxygen? It's where all the blood is in the lungs. Where all the blood is in your lower lungs when you're sitting up or standing up. So if you're doing chest breathing, it's not even getting in there as well. That's one of the reasons why we breathe in so much oxygen that our bodies could even take, because we're so inefficient at breathing so much. The lower levels of CO2, carbon dioxide, disrupt how your body senses breathfulness. A sigh, a yawn, a hiccup, that's more than you realize. They're not just quirks. They're automatic resets triggered by your brainstem. The brainstem is what registers that threshold where it is when that CO levels drops too low or the breathing rhythm becomes erratic. So that CO2 level that your brainstem's registering over time, have you lowered that? It thinks you don't have as much in there, but it thinks you need more, but you don't really. So do you run out of breath when speaking, even if you feel calm? Yeah, I'll do this. So that's often because your breathing pattern shifts subconsciously, unconsciously, under mild stress, leading to overbreathing and a drop in brain oxygen, constricting the oxygen and the blood that goes to your prefrontal cortex. Deep breathing makes you feel dizzy or anxious. Well, that happens when deep becomes too much. Overbreathing lowers the CO2, which narrows the blood vessels and disrupts oxygen delivery. So do you get worked up fast? Oh, my goodness. So do you get worked up fast over the small things? Well, it's a chemically primed nervous system from chronic overbreathing that make your body react like it's always under threat, even when it's not. So here's some quick sources. Stephanie White, she's at measurableresilience.com, and she's at the autonomic lab at the Virginia. This should be Virginia, not Virginia. Virginia Commonwealth University. That's where I've got a lot of my training has been through her over the last 6 months. The Heart Rate Variability Institute, they have great annual conferences. And Catno Learning by Peter Litchfield. He's the one that has the nasal cannula with the CO2. You can get, and he has a book, which you have to go to his website to buy, just to Google it. 2 books that are great to start off with this, and they're still, even though they're starting out, they're excellent to know depth too. The Oxygen Advantage by Patrick McCowan. He does a lot on with athletes, but he does a lot in just general as well too. He does more of the breath hold type work. Then there's Breath by James Nestor. And this is a great overview of one person's going in a rabbit hole much deeper than I've done, and his path through it as a journalist. And he writes extremely good. He has it's a great audio as well too. He really speaks in colors really well. Now there's an asterisk here because that's being going over by In the Ark Sunday at 10 a.m. At the time we're about this presentation. They're reading and discussing Breath by James Nestor, that book. You can always do Coherent, the box breathing videos. I used to ignore them, but now I pay attention to them. And also in taking a moment during, many of the advocates will do this, and that's excellent. And notice, like when you're online, like now, are you breathing through your nose? Or do you notice any screen apnea? Screen apnea is that term I have learned very recently, and it's staring at one of these things or your screen, however you are, and you get so involved, you actually stop breathing. And it's probably more of you breathe too shallow. It's a very common thing. As a matter of fact, I've noticed it almost all the time when I get to work and I'm doing something, I can catch myself doing exactly this. It's ways that in our modern times, we just almost naturally develop bad breathing habits. That's it. This Q&A. Thanks, guys.